TSA predicts that today is one of the busiest air travel days of the holiday season. An unfortunate timing after a plane crash in South Korea killed 179 people. News 4's Caroline Gerhardt reassures us that despite that tragedy, you should have a peace of mind if you're planning to take the skies.
Planes, trains, and automobiles are rushing to get holiday travelers to their destinations. Those hitting the skies might feel wary after a deadly plane crash in South Korea yesterday. Accidents like that can understandably invoke fear, but we're here to remind you that flying is one of the safest ways to travel. The plane involved in that crash was a Boeing 737-800, which FAA safety inspectors call one of the safest airplanes currently in use. Airport runways are also designed so that even planes with failed landing gear can land safely. Early unofficial reports point to the possibility that a bird caused that plane crash. David Sosi, a former FAA safety inspector, says even then there are safeguards in place.
Never done an accident investigation where a bird strike, even when the engine fails, causes the landing gear to not come down.
Pilots train for engine out situations. They train for bird strikes.
If you're still feeling some flight anxiety before you take off, experts recommend using breathing exercises, positively visualizing a safe takeoff and landing, and take some time to familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of aviation and positive statistics of airplanes.